What you just heard was the beginning of an incident that would cost a restaurant chain $1.7 million, destroy a 23-year career, and trigger a federal civil rights investigation into a corporate policy that had been quietly documented in complaints for over a decade. The man demanding a family leave? Marcus Heilmann, 47, a contracted security officer with a badge, a radio, and a pattern. 11 complaints in 6 years. 11, not for theft prevention, not for crowd control, for targeting black customers in premium dining sections, making them show proof of payment when white diners sat unbothered, following them to bathrooms, hovering near their tables, and in this case, on April 6, 2024, demanding a family of 3 leave a restaurant they had every right to be in. The family? Dr. Simone and Marcus Patterson, both educators, and their 8-year-old daughter Zara. No criminal record, no history of complaints, no reason to be approached except the assumption coded into Heilmann's instincts and the unspoken protocols that governed who belonged in the premium section of a casual dining chain. By 6:42 that evening, cell phone footage would be uploaded. By midnight, it would have 2 million views. Within 72 hours, the corporate owner would personally intervene. And within 6 weeks, Heilmann's career would be over. The Pattersons would file a lawsuit with claims totaling $3.4 million. And the settlement would rewrite policy for 317 franchise locations across 9 states. This is what happened when assumption became accusation, and when accusation became evidence. Dr. Simone Patterson had spent 17 years teaching high school chemistry. She had a PhD in education policy from Northwestern. She'd published 2 peer-reviewed articles on equitable access in STEM curricula. She'd never raised her voice at a server, never skipped a bill, never caused a disturbance in any establishment she'd ever entered. But none of that mattered at 6:15 on a Tuesday evening when Marcus Heilmann decided she didn't belong. Before we continue, where are you watching from? This story went viral in 48 states, but the policy changes it triggered affect every state. If you want to see more stories where accountability actually happens, hit subscribe. We post every Tuesday and Friday. Now, let's go back. The Golden Cove Seafood and Steakhouse sits on the corner of Riverside Boulevard and Hammond Street in suburban Louisville, Kentucky. It's a franchise location, part of a chain owned by Coastal Dining Holdings, a privately held corporation with 317 restaurants across the South and Midwest. The building is new construction, built in 2019, with the chain's updated aesthetic. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, nautical decor that hovers somewhere between upscale and approachable. The kind of place where you can get king crab legs and ribeye for $39.99 on weeknights, $49.99 on weekends. The layout is deliberate. The front section, visible from the parking lot, is standard booths and tables. Families, kids, noise. The back section, separated by a half wall and elevated 3 steps, is the premium area. Leather booths, dimmer lighting. A separate carving station with prime rib and lobster tail. Technically, anyone who pays can sit anywhere. Practically, the servers steer certain customers towards certain sections. It's subtle. A glance, a suggestion, a claim that the premium section is reserved for large parties. On April 6, 2024, at 5:58 p.m., the restaurant was 70% full. Tuesday dinner rush, families finishing early meals, a few solo diners at the bar. The premium section had 6 occupied tables out of 14. No reservations, no events, just regular customers. The Pattersons arrived at 6:03. Dr. Simone Patterson, 39. Her husband, Marcus Patterson, 42, a middle school principal. Their daughter, Zara, 8. They were dressed casually but neatly. Simone in a cardigan and slacks. Marcus in a button-down. Zara in a school hoodie. They requested a table in the premium section because Zara loved the aquarium built into the wall, a 400-gallon saltwater tank with clownfish and tangs. The hostess, a 22-year-old named Kelsey Truman, seated them without hesitation. Booth 7, next to the aquarium. She brought menus, crayons for Zara, and took their drink order. water for Simone, iced tea for Marcus, Sprite for Zara. Everything proceeded normally. At 6:11, they approached the buffet. Simone took crab legs and shrimp. Marcus loaded a plate with prime rib and roasted vegetables. Zara got mac and cheese and a bread roll. They returned to their table. They ate, they talked. Zara watched the fish. At 6:15, Marcus Heilmann approached their table. Dr. Simone Patterson grew up in Gary, Indiana, the daughter of a factory foreman and a public school librarian. She was the first in her family to attend a 4-year university. She earned a full scholarship to Indiana University, graduated summa cum laude with a degree in chemistry and secondary education, and went directly into teaching at age 22. Her first job was at Northside High School in Indianapolis, a Title I school with a 68% graduation rate and a science department that hadn't been updated since the 90s. She taught general chemistry and AP chemistry. Within 3 years, her AP pass rate went from 11% to 43%. She wrote grants. She secured lab equipment. She stayed late every Tuesday and Thursday for tutoring. She attended every graduation. She knew every student by name. At 27, she enrolled in a PhD program at Northwestern University, studying part-time while continuing to teach full-time. Her dissertation focused on equitable access to advanced STEM curricula in under-resourced schools. It took her 6 years to complete. She published 2 articles in peer-reviewed journals. She presented at 3 national conferences. She earned her doctorate at 33, then returned to teaching. She moved to Louisville in 2016, when her husband Marcus accepted a principal position at Fairview Middle School. She took a job at Central High School, teaching chemistry and serving as the department chair. Her students called her Dr. P. Her colleagues respected her. Her principal wrote in her most recent evaluation, "Dr. Patterson exemplifies excellence in pedagogy, collegiality, and student advocacy. She is an asset to this institution and this district." In 17 years of teaching, she had never been written up, never been reprimanded, never had a parent complaint sustained against her. She had won Teacher of the Year twice. She had been invited to serve on the district's curriculum committee. She had mentored 14 first-year teachers. Her husband Marcus had a similar record. He'd been an educator for 19 years. He'd taught social studies for 12 years before moving into administration. He'd been an assistant principal for 4 years, then a principal for 3. His school had improved its standardized test scores by 18% under his leadership. He'd reduced disciplinary incidents by 22%. He'd implemented a restorative justice program that became a model for the district. Together, they lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in the Highlands neighborhood. They drove a 7-year-old Honda Accord and a 5-year-old Toyota Camry. They attended Mount Zion Baptist Church on Sundays. They volunteered at the local food bank twice a month. They saved for Zara's college fund. They took 1 vacation a year, usually to visit Simone's parents in Gary. They were not wealthy. They were not flashy. They were careful with money, deliberate in their choices, and intentional about the example they set for Zara. April 6th was a Tuesday. Simone had stayed late at school for a department meeting. Marcus had parent-teacher conferences until 5:30. They were both exhausted. They had planned to cook at home, but Zara had asked to go to Golden Cove because she loved watching the fish while she ate. It was a small indulgence, a $40 meal, a chance to sit down together without doing dishes. They arrived tired but happy. Marcus held the door for Simone. Zara skipped ahead to the hostess stand. When Kelsey asked if they wanted a booth or a table, Zara pointed at the aquarium. "Can we sit by the fish?" Kelsey smiled and said, "Of course." They didn't ask for special treatment. They didn't expect to be treated differently. They just wanted to eat a meal, watch their daughter smile at clownfish, and go home. At 6:15, Marcus Heilmann approached their table and told them they had to leave. Simone's first instinct was confusion. She looked around, wondering if there was a fire alarm, a gas leak, something wrong with the building. But other tables were still eating. No one else was being asked to move. She asked why. Heilmann didn't answer the question. He repeated the demand. "You need to leave." Marcus, her husband, put down his fork. He's calm by nature, slow to anger, trained in conflict de-escalation as a school administrator. He asked if there was a problem with their reservation. Heilmann said the section was reserved. Marcus pointed to the other tables. Still occupied, still eating. Reserved for who? Heilmann's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Simone felt something shift in her chest. Not anger yet. Recognition. She'd lived this before. Not at a restaurant, but in department stores where she'd been followed. In airport security lines where she'd been pulled aside. In faculty meetings where her credentials were questioned and her white colleagues were assumed. She knew what this was. She asked to speak to a manager. Heilmann said that wasn't necessary. She just needed to leave. Marcus pulled out his phone. He set it on the table, recording. Not hidden, not secret, just visible, a quiet assertion of evidence. If you're asking us to leave, he said, we need to know why. We paid. We're eating. We haven't broken any rules. That's when Heilmann said the line that would end his career. You're creating a disturbance. Simone looked at Zara, who was staring at her macaroni, confused and scared. She looked at Marcus, whose hand was shaking slightly as he held the phone. She looked at the other diners, white families at every surrounding table. None of them bothered, none of them approached. And she said, we're not going anywhere. Marcus Heilmann was hired by Sentinel Guard Services in 2001, fresh out of a 12-week security training program and a background check that flagged no criminal record. He was 24. He needed work. Sentinel Guard contracted with retail, stores, office buildings, and restaurant chains across Kentucky and Indiana. The pay was $12 an hour. The hours were irregular. The authority was limited but real. Heilmann took the job seriously. He showed up on time. He wore the uniform correctly. He followed protocol, or at least the version of protocol he understood. He worked mall security first, then a hospital campus, then the Golden Cove location in Louisville starting in 2018. His supervisors described him as reliable. He didn't call in sick. He didn't leave early. He filled out incident reports. But there were complaints, quiet ones at first. A customer said he'd been rude. Another said he'd followed her to her car for no reason. The complaints didn't rise to the level of termination. They went into a file, a pattern nobody wanted to name. In 2019, a black couple dining at Golden Cove complained that Heilmann had asked to see their receipt mid-meal, implying they hadn't paid. The general manager apologized, comped their dessert, and told Heilmann to be more careful. No formal discipline, no training, just a verbal reminder. In 2020, another complaint. A black family said Heilmann had told them the premium section was full, even though they could see open tables. They were redirected to the front section. They didn't escalate. They just left a one-star review online, buried among hundreds of other reviews. In 2021, 3 complaints in 4 months, all from black customers, all describing the same behavior, being watched, followed, questioned, or asked to move. One described Heilmann standing near their table for the entire meal, arms crossed, staring. Another said he'd asked for ID to verify a credit card, something he didn't ask white diners to provide. Sentinel Guard received the complaints. They required Heilmann to complete an online diversity training module. He finished it in 40 minutes, clicked through the slides, passed the quiz. Nothing changed. By 2022, the complaints were more specific. A woman named Charisse Coleman filed a formal grievance after Heilmann accused her of dining and dashing, even though she had a receipt and had left a tip. She demanded an apology. The restaurant manager gave her a gift card. Heilmann got a written warning, not for racial profiling, for poor customer service. In 2023, 2 more incidents. Both involved black customers in the premium section. Both involved Heilmann questioning whether they belonged. One customer was a cardiologist. The other was a city councilman. Both complained directly to corporate. Corporate sent a memo to the franchise owner. The franchise owner forwarded it to Sentinel Guard. Sentinel Guard sent Heilmann to a 1-day seminar on implicit bias. He attended. He signed the attendance sheet. He went back to work. 11 complaints in 6 years. 11. That's not bad luck. That's a pattern. That's a man who saw certain customers as threats, certain faces as suspicious, certain bodies as out of place. And that pattern was documented, filed, and ignored until it couldn't be ignored anymore. Heilmann wasn't stupid. He knew he couldn't say the quiet part out loud. He couldn't tell customers they didn't belong because of their race. So he used other language. The section is reserved. You're creating a disturbance. I need to verify your payment. Code words that justified removal without admitting bias. He believed he was doing his job. He believed he was protecting the restaurant. He believed certain people were more likely to cause problems, and his job was to intervene before problems happened. That's what implicit bias looks like. Not hatred, assumption. The unexamined belief that some people belong and some people don't. On April 6th, when he approached the Pattersons' table, he wasn't thinking about his 11 prior complaints. He wasn't thinking about the legal liability. He wasn't thinking about the fact that the family had done nothing wrong. He was thinking that they didn't fit, that something felt off, that he needed to address it, and so he did. He walked up to their table at 6:15. He didn't check their receipt. He didn't ask the hostess if they'd been seated properly. He didn't observe any actual disturbance. He just decided, based on nothing but instinct coded by bias, that they had to go. It was the same instinct that had generated 11 complaints. The same instinct that had cost his employer thousands in gift cards and apologies. The same instinct that would, in 6 weeks, cost him his career. Because this time, there was a camera, and this time, the family didn't leave. Do you think security personnel with multiple racial profiling complaints should be allowed to keep working in customer-facing roles? Drop your answer below. At 6:15, Marcus Heilmann approached booth 7. He didn't greet the family. He didn't introduce himself. He walked up to the table, arms crossed, and said, "You need to leave." Simone looked up from her plate, a forkful of crab halfway to her mouth. She glanced at her husband. She glanced at Zara, who had stopped eating and was staring at the man in the uniform. She said, "Excuse me?" Heilmann didn't soften. "You heard me. This section is reserved. You can't be here." Marcus set down his fork. He's trained to stay calm in confrontations. He deals with upset parents, angry students, school board meetings where people scream. He kept his voice level. "Reserved for who?" "We paid. We're eating." Heilmann's face didn't change. "Doesn't matter. I'm asking you to leave." Simone felt her pulse quicken, but her voice stayed steady. "We have a receipt. We're halfway through our meal. Our daughter is eating." Heilmann shifted his weight, his hand moving to the radio clipped to his belt. "I don't care about your receipt. You need to go. Now." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the receipt. He held it up. $42.16. Paid at 6:04. We were seated by the hostess. We haven't done anything wrong. Heilmann didn't look at the receipt. This is where assumption becomes impenetrable. When facts don't matter because the conclusion has already been reached. He said, "You're creating a disturbance." Simone's voice sharpened. "We're sitting here eating crab legs. How is that a disturbance?" At the next table, a white couple in their 50s stopped eating. They turned to watch. The woman whispered something to her husband. He frowned. At the table beyond that, a family with 3 kids went quiet. The father pulled out his phone. Heilmann noticed the phones. His jaw tightened. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Simone leaned forward. "Harder than what?" "You haven't explained anything. You just walked up and demanded we leave." Zara started to cry, quietly, into her napkin. Simone reached over and put a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "It's okay, baby. We're okay." But they weren't okay. This is where bias becomes danger. When a man with a badge and a radio decides compliance is mandatory and explanation is optional. Heilmann pointed toward the exit. "Last warning. Leave voluntarily or I'll have you removed." Marcus felt heat rising in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "We're not leaving. Call your manager." Heilmann's hand moved to his radio. "Fine. but you're leaving one way or another. The white couple at the next table stood up. The man, mid-50s, wearing a polo and khakis, walked over. He addressed Heilmann directly. "Excuse me, what's the problem here?" Heilmann turned. "Sir, this doesn't concern you." The man gestured to the Pattersons. "They're just eating. Why are you asking them to leave?" Heilmann's face flushed. "Sir, I need you to step back." The man didn't step back. "I'm a customer too. I've been watching." They haven't done anything. Across the restaurant, the general manager, a 34-year-old named Eric Polito, emerged from the back office. He'd been alerted by a server who saw the confrontation escalating. He walked quickly toward the premium section, already assessing the situation. Heilmann standing over a table, a family looking up at him, other customers watching, phones out. Eric approached and said, "Marcus, what's going on?" Heilmann turned. "I'm handling a situation." Eric looked at the Pattersons. He didn't know them, but he recognized the posture, the forced calm, the fear in the child's eyes. He said, "What situation?" Heilmann gestured vaguely. "They're in the premium section. It's reserved." Eric frowned. "Reserved for who?" "We don't have any events tonight." Heilmann hesitated. "Just reserved." Eric turned to the Pattersons. "Did you pay?" Marcus held up the receipt again. 4216, 604. Eric nodded. "Then there's no problem." He looked at Heilmann. "Marcus, I need you to step away." Heilmann's voice rose. "I'm doing my job." Eric's voice dropped. "Your job is to handle actual problems. This isn't a problem. Step away." Heilmann stood there for 3 long seconds. The restaurant had gone quiet. Every table in the premium section was watching. Every phone was recording. He knew he was cornered, but he couldn't back down without admitting he was wrong. So he said the thing that would be quoted in every news article, every lawsuit filing, every corporate memo. "Fine. But I know what I saw." Eric stared at him. "What did you see?" Heilmann didn't answer. He turned and walked toward the kitchen, his face red, his hands balled into fists. Eric turned to the Pattersons. "I am so sorry. Please finish your meal. Everything is on the house tonight." Simone's voice shook. "What just happened?" Eric exhaled. "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." Marcus was still recording. He said, "We'd like an explanation. In writing." Eric nodded. "You'll have it." The white man from the next table spoke again. "I saw the whole thing." He walked up and demanded they leave. No reason, no explanation. Just told them to go. Eric thanked him and took his contact information. 2 other diners approached with the same offer. By 6:27, Eric had 4 witness statements. By 6:32, he'd called his district manager. By 6:38, Marcus Patterson had uploaded the video to Twitter. The video was 2 minutes and 43 seconds long. It started mid-confrontation, with Heilmann saying, "You need to leave," and ended with Eric intervening. The caption read, "Eating dinner with my family at Golden Cove in Louisville. Security told us to leave the reserved section we were seated in by the hostess. Why? You tell me." Within an hour, the video had 12,000 views. Within 2 hours, 34,000. By midnight, 2.1 million. By morning, it was on local news. By the afternoon, national outlets picked it up. Golden Cove's corporate Twitter account was flooded. Thousands of replies, boycott threats, demands for accountability, the hashtag Zara Golden Cove racism, trended in 48 states. This is where assumption becomes evidence. When the quiet pattern documented in 11 complaints becomes a 2-minute video, watched by millions. Do you think restaurants should be held liable when contracted security staff racially profile customers? Let us know in the comments. At 9:42 a.m. the next morning, April 7th, Gerald Whitman stepped off a private plane at Louisville International Airport. Whitman, 61, was the founder and CEO of Coastal Dining Holdings, the parent company that owned Golden Cove. He'd built the company from a single location in Pensacola in 1997 to 317 franchises across 9 states. He was worth an estimated $230 million. He lived in Naples, Florida. He played golf twice a week. He rarely visited individual locations unless there was a crisis. This was a crisis. He'd been alerted at 6:53 a.m. by his VP of Operations, who sent him the video with a one-line message. "We have a problem." By 7:30, Whitman had spoken to his legal team, his PR director, and his head of franchise relations. By 8:15, he was on the plane. He arrived at the Louisville Golden Cove location at 10:36 a.m. The restaurant was closed. Eric Polito, the general manager, was waiting in the parking lot. So was Kelsey Truman, the hostess. So was the district manager, a 47-year-old named Monica Reese, who'd driven from Indianapolis overnight. Whitman didn't small talk. He walked into the restaurant, sat down at a table in the premium section, and said, "Tell me everything." Eric walked him through it. The family arrived at 6:03, seated in booth 7, ordered drinks, went to the buffet, returned to their table, started eating. At 6:15, Heilmann approached and demanded they leave. No provocation, no disturbance, no reason. Whitman asked, "Did you check the reservation system?" Eric nodded. "No reservations. For that section. No events. Nothing reserved." Whitman asked, "Has Heilmann done this before?" Monica Reese opened a laptop and pulled up a file. 11 complaints, 6 years, all involving black customers, all describing similar behavior. Whitman's jaw tightened. "Why is he still working?" Monica hesitated. "He's not our employee. He's contracted through Sentinel Guard. We filed complaints with them. They did training. It didn't stop." Whitman looked at her for a long moment, then said, "He's done. I want him off every property we own. Today." Monica said, "I'll call Sentinel Guard." Whitman said, "No, I'll call them. And I want the family's contact information. I'm meeting with them personally." Eric pulled out his phone and found the receipt. Dr. Simone Patterson. He read the phone number. Whitman called from the restaurant at 11:08 a.m. Simone answered on the third ring. He identified himself, apologized, and asked if she and her husband would meet with him. She said she'd call him back after speaking with her attorney. She called back at 2:14 p.m. She agreed to meet at her attorney's office the next day. At 3:37 p.m., Whitman called the CEO of Sentinel Guard Services. The conversation lasted 6 minutes. By the end, Sentinel Guard agreed to terminate Heilmann's contract immediately and blacklist him from future placements. Whitman made it clear, if Heilmann worked security anywhere near a coastal dining property, the contract with Sentinel Guard would be terminated chain-wide. Heilmann was called into the Sentinel Guard office at 4:52 p.m. He was handed a termination letter, effective immediately. No severance, no recommendation. 23 years of security work. Over. He tried to argue. He said he was doing his job. He said the family was suspicious. He said he followed protocol. The supervisor cut him off. "Your protocol got us dropped by a 317 location client. You're done." Heilmann walked out at 5:07 p.m., carrying a box with his uniforms and his badge. He never worked security again. Do you think a 23-year career should end because of racial profiling incidents? Share your thoughts below. By April 9th, 72 hours after the video was posted, the story had been covered by CNN, NBC, ABC, the Associated Press, the Louisville Courier-Journal, the Washington Post, and USA Today. The headlines wrote themselves. Black family ejected from restaurant for eating while black. Security guard fired after viral video shows racist confrontation. Golden Cove CEO flies to Louisville to apologize after discrimination incident. Educator and principal humiliated at chain restaurant over imaginary reservation. The video had been viewed 18 million times. The Golden Cove corporate statement, posted on April 8th, had been shared 240,000 times. It read, "Coastal Dining Holdings is horrified and ashamed by the treatment Dr. Simone Patterson, Mr. Marcus Patterson, and their daughter experienced at our Louisville location. This behavior does not represent our values or our policies. We have terminated our relationship with the security contractor involved and implemented immediate policy changes to prevent this from ever happening again. We have reached out to the Patterson family to apologize directly and to make this right. We failed them. We own that failure. On April 10th, Gerald Whitman met with Simone and Marcus Patterson at the office of their attorney, Michelle Borden, a civil rights litigator with 14 years of experience and a track record of seven-figure settlements. The meeting lasted 93 minutes. Whitman apologized. Not a corporate apology, a human one. He acknowledged the harm. He acknowledged the pattern. He acknowledged that 11 complaints should have resulted in action years earlier. He said the responsibility was his, not just Heilmann's. Simone asked the question that mattered. What changes now? Whitman pulled out a document. It was a draft policy, written in the 36 hours since the incident. It included mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, not online modules, but in-person sessions led by civil rights organizations. A third-party audit of all customer complaints filed in the past 10 years to identify patterns. A revised security protocol that required supervisor approval before asking any customer to leave. A zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior, with immediate termination for violations. A customer hotline for reporting discrimination. With complaints directed to corporate rather than individual franchises, Simone read it. She said, "This is a start." Marcus said, "What about accountability?" Whitman asked what that looked like. Borden, the attorney, said, "Compensation for the harm. Not just an apology. Recognition that this was a civil rights violation." Whitman nodded. He didn't negotiate. He didn't lowball. He said, "What do you need?" Borden filed a lawsuit on April 15th. The claims totaled $3.4 million, $1.2 million for emotional distress, $1 million for reputational harm, $200,000 for therapy and related costs for Zara. The legal standard in Kentucky for such claims was high. Damages required proof of intent, harm, and negligence. But Coastal Dining Holdings didn't fight it. On May 23rd, 47 days after the incident, the case settled for $1.7 million. The settlement included a written apology, a commitment to the policy changes, and a requirement that Coastal Dining Holdings report annually on discrimination complaints for 5 years. The Pattersons donated $400,000 of the settlement to the Louisville chapter of the NAACP. They set up a college fund for Zara. They paid off their mortgage. Simone took a sabbatical to write about the experience. Marcus continued working as a principal. In a statement released after the settlement, Simone said, "We didn't do this for money. We did this so the next family doesn't have to experience what we did. We did this so companies understand there are consequences for allowing discrimination to continue unchecked." Heilmann's termination letter, leaked to the press in June, included a single line that summarized his career. "Your pattern of behavior created legal and reputational liability that this company cannot sustain. Your employment is terminated effective immediately." He filed for unemployment. It was denied. He applied for jobs at other security firms. None would hire him. His name had been in the news too many times. His record, once overlooked, was now public. By August, he'd taken a job stocking shelves overnight at a warehouse. The pay was $9 an hour. No badge, no authority. Just a man who'd spent 23 years in a career that ended because he couldn't see past his assumptions. Heilmann's career is over. That's consequence. The city paid $1.7 million. That's accountability. But the question remains, what changes now? Do you think $1.7 million was too much, too little, or the right amount for this kind of violation? Drop your opinion below. On June 3rd, 2024, Dr. Simone Patterson was invited to speak at a Louisville Metro Council hearing on discrimination in public accommodations. The hearing was organized in response to the Golden Cove incident and 3 other similar cases that had been reported in the Louisville area in the prior year. Simone agreed to testify. She sat at a table facing the council, a microphone in front of her, her husband in the front row. She didn't read from notes. She spoke directly. "I teach chemistry. I teach the periodic table, molecular bonds, stoichiometry. I teach my students that science is about evidence, observation, proof, You can't make assumptions. You have to test your hypothesis. But on April 6th, Marcus Heilmann didn't need evidence. He looked at my family and made an assumption. He assumed we didn't belong. He assumed we hadn't paid. He assumed we were a problem. And because he had a badge and a radio, he had the power to act on that assumption. My daughter was 8 years old. She was eating macaroni and cheese. She was watching fish swim in a tank, and she had to watch a man in a uniform tell her parents to leave. She asked me later, "Mama, did we do something bad?" I had to explain to her that we didn't. But that sometimes people treat you badly because of what you look like. That's the conversation no parent should have to have with their child. But it's the conversation Black parents have been having for generations. Because incidents like this aren't new. They're just now being recorded. Marcus Heilmann had 11 complaints in 6 years. 11 families before us experienced some version of what we experienced. But nothing changed. He kept working. He kept profiling. He kept targeting Black customers. Because there were no consequences. The question I keep coming back to is, why does it take a viral video for accountability to happen? Why does it take millions of views, national headlines, and a lawsuit for a company to look at a pattern of complaints and say, maybe this person shouldn't be working here? I don't want sympathy. I want systems to change. I want companies to take complaints seriously the first time, not the 11th time. I want security training that teaches people to check their biases, not just their radios. I want my daughter to grow up in a world where she can eat crab legs in peace without worrying that someone will decide she doesn't belong. We settled our case. We got an apology. We got policy changes. But I'm not naive. I know this will happen again, somewhere else, to someone else. Because the problem isn't one security guard. The problem is a culture that allows assumptions to replace evidence. And until we address that culture, we're just waiting for the next video. The council chamber was silent when she finished. 3 council members thanked her. 2 apologized. The hearing led to a citywide review of discrimination complaint procedures. Marcus Heilmann wasn't an outlier. He was a symptom. 11 complaints in 6 years isn't a rogue actor. It's a system failure. It's a company that received documentation, filed it away, and hoped the problem would go away on its own. It's a security contractor that chose online training modules over actual accountability. It's a culture that treats bias as an individual problem instead of an institutional one. The real question is, what changes now? Golden Cove implemented new policies, mandatory in-person training, third-party audits, revised protocols, a zero-tolerance policy. Those are good steps, but policies only matter if they're enforced. And enforcement only happens when companies fear consequences more than they fear inconvenience. Before the video went viral, Coastal Dining Holdings had no incentive to act. 11 complaints didn't cost them money, didn't hurt their brand, didn't threaten their franchise agreements. So they filed the complaints, sent Heilmann to a seminar, and moved on. It was easier than confronting the pattern, easier than admitting they'd let discrimination continue under their name. The video changed the equation. Suddenly, inaction had a price. 18 million views, boycott threats, national headlines, a lawsuit with claims totaling 3.4 million. That got their attention. Not because they suddenly cared more about civil rights, but because the cost of ignoring the problem became higher than the cost of fixing it. That's not a moral victory. That's math. Here's what we know about patterns. They don't start suddenly. They build. Heilmann didn't wake up on April 6th and decide to profile a family for the first time. He'd been doing it for years. Complaint 1 should have triggered a conversation. Complaint 3 should have triggered retraining. Complaint 5 should have triggered termination. Instead, it took complaint 11 and a viral video to end a career that should have ended a decade earlier. And here's what we know about systems. They protect themselves. Companies don't implement changes out of goodness. They implement changes when it's more expensive not to, when the lawsuit is filed, when the settlement is paid, when the headline goes national. So what changes now? First, We stop treating bias as an individual failing and start treating it as a systems failure. When one employee has 11 complaints, that's not just a bad employee. That's a company that didn't act on documented evidence. Second, we demand transparency. Coastal Dining Holdings agreed to report annually on discrimination complaints for 5 years. That's a start. But every company with customer-facing staff should be required to report patterns publicly. Sunshine is the best disinfectant. Third, we take complaints seriously the first time, not the third time, not the 11th time, the first time. Because every complaint after the first is a failure of accountability. And fourth, we keep recording. We keep documenting. We keep making the invisible visible. Because the only reason the Pattersons got justice is because Marcus had his phone out. Without that video, this is just another complaint in a file nobody reads. Heilmann lost his career. The Pattersons got $1.7 million and an apology. Golden Cove changed its policies. Those are consequences. Those are outcomes. But we're still waiting for the system to change. Because if we don't fix the system that allowed 11 complaints to be ignored, then we're just waiting for the next Marcus Heilmann, the next viral video, the next family asked to leave. And that's not justice. That's just a cycle. If you want to see more stories where accountability actually happens, subscribe. We post every Tuesday and Friday. And if this story made you think, share it. Because the only way systems change is when enough people demand it. Should companies be required to publicly report patterns of discrimination, complaints from their staff? Let us know what you think. Where are you watching from? Drop your location below.